Let me bring in Dr. David Day, who's CEO of... how do you pronounce the name of your company, David? I don't want to get it wrong.
Samurai, as in the Warriors. Samurai Digital Security.
Samurai, there we go. Digital security. Better getting you to say it than me mangle it, David.
Okay.
Look, the trial heard that one of Brianna's killers, Scarlett Jenkinson, began to fantasize about killing people from the age of 14. And that was around the time she started to access red rooms on the dark web. Now, I have no idea what a red room is. Help me understand this.
Oh, I don't know if I want to be honest. Red rooms are horrific, vile, horrible places that are made available on the dark web, obviously, because of the anonymity that it provides the people that use them. But if you want me to be honest about it, red rooms are places where vulnerable people are taken, often homeless people, tortured, murdered online while people watch and often pay to watch. They are disgusting, vile places. I didn't even want to answer it, but you asked.
And that is a thing. That's what happens on a regular enough basis for the.
That's a thing. Yes.
Sometimes I think I'm living on a different planet. I didn't even know this. I really didn't. I genuinely didn't.
When I heard you'd been watching them, I was kind of shocked. They're very depressing, dark, vile places. They're the absolute gutter of the internet. And obviously, you expose a vulnerable mind.
This is the live streaming of people being tortured and killed. And
yes.
For those people who are watching it, is it sexually motivated to watch, or what? Why would anyone watch that?
I don't have a clue. Honestly, I have no idea. Obviously, people with a morbid fascination in whatever form for seeing people being utterly and horrifically abused. What their motivations are, I wouldn't even like to guess. But they're obviously very troubled, sick people.
And the dark web in itself, just so that I get my head around the basics of this, that is an area of the internet where people have anonymity. Is that the definition of the dark web, or what is it?
Yeah, you've pretty much got it right at that. Without going into too many technical details, it's a relay of hosts which provides encryption and anonymity so that whatever you're viewing can't be detected. Your source, your identity, your IP address, which is what the internet uses to identify you, is obfuscated, is hidden, is encrypted, and whatever messages you're sending out, whatever information you're putting out, it's not until it gets to the exit node to the end before it actually finds its way onto the internet. So it's, in essence, not completely, but almost impossible to find out where that came from, the information came from. So it's impunity for nasty, horrible activities.
And have the police infiltrated it?
They're trying to, but again, it's incredibly hard. You can't argue with the technology. The technology was designed actually by the US Navy in the mid-90s and didn't become open source to the community until 2004. So it's military-grade encryption and military-grade and designed inherently to protect secrets, and then opened up to the use of everybody. So technically, it's incredibly hard. All you can do from an identification point of view is law enforcement can try and grab as many entry nodes to it and exit nodes to it, but it's a tiny percentage of information that they'll be finding by doing that. They actually work harder with traditional policing methods, such as trying to infiltrate the malicious parties that are using it. In other words, pretending to be one of them and building their confidence and then hoping they're going to say something to incriminate themselves and then obviously catch them the traditional ways. They want to give themselves away. They're looking for them to identify themselves in verbally, rather than through the technology, if that makes sense.
And have we any idea how many people in each country, well, for the UK, for example, have we any idea how many people are likely to be using this thing?
Well, it's borderless, so it's impossible to say by country because there's no borders there, no means of getting those figures. I can tell you that estimates are approximately 3 million people per day that use the dark web. So it's a big number.
I'm nearly minded to want to speak to. We've been speaking to them all weekend. A forensic psychologist about that in itself. Why on earth would millions of people be attracted in any way to that?
Well,
it's astonishing.
Just let me mention the other side, because if I don't, the privacy advocates would have me for it. But there is some legitimate reasons for using the dark web. For example, certain countries have very strict censorship rules and very heavy surveillance, and people don't feel safe to talk or communicate. So it's an opportunity for them to do that. There's whistleblowing as well, platforms that allow whistleblowers to talk
but we're
about
not talking
things.
about any of that, David, are we? We're talking We're talking here about
I understand.
Children and adults, and Scarlett Jenkinson began to look at this type of stuff when she was 14 years of age, fantasized about killing people, and that's when she accessed red rooms on the dark web. That's the type of stuff.
I know. I think what's happening.
So how do you stop teenage children for whatever reason if they are tempted to go onto the dark web? My goodness, it's terrifying. How do you keep them off it? What do you do?
Well, first of all, they need to learn from a very early age, from the parents, from the schools, from anybody in authority, that the internet is an inherently dangerous place. The whole of the internet, not just the dark web, but the whole of the internet. And of course, when I talk about the internet in traditional use, we talk about that as the surface web. And normally what children do if they're troubled, if they have mental health issues, if they have, if they're not quite right mentally, they'll start off with the surface web. So in other words, they'll go onto forums and chat rooms on the traditional internet and make connections with people who have similar problem patterns of behavior, similar issues, and then they get encouraged onto the dark web. And I can give you a personal example. I asked I've got a preteen and a teenage daughter, and I asked them both, what do you know about the dark web? Have you heard of the dark web? Both of them knew exactly what it was and exactly what they could find on there, which was a concern. Then my oldest told me that she had actually been encouraged to go onto the dark web to view and engage with a self-harm group, one that glorifies self-harm. So this is how it happens. They get pulled into the dark web from the surface web, and then they become desensitized to all the nasty things that are on there, things that are inherently sick and wrong. They become desensitized to it because they see so much of it. And then their own thought patterns, if there's any sort of nasty or horrible or troubled problems that they're dealing with, it becomes normalized. So if they're looking at violence or considering drug abuse, that behavior becomes normal to them because of how much they're seeing on the dark web. And that's how they get into these kind of patterns. So my advice to parents would be to look for that. Look for those patterns. So open communication, establish open judgment-free lines of communication Encourage children to share their online experiences and curiosities, and educate yourself. The children know more about the adults.
Teenagers aren't going to do that, David, are they? They're not going to share their online experiences now, are they? They'll be talking inappropriately to their friends. Obviously, we can't make sweeping statements, but some of them will be. They'll be talking about girlfriends and boyfriends. They'll be talking about their parents, for goodness sake, inappropriately.
No, but you can
they'll be looking up and watching pornography. They'll be doing all of that, and they ain't going to share that with their parents.
Well, at what age, right? So if you're trying to approach this when they get to 15, 16, 17, it's too late. But children do tend to listen to their parents when they're younger. So that message needs to be instilled into them when they're still young enough to actually take it on board. So I think it's a bit dismissive to think that children aren't going to open up to you, because the easy option would be think they won't, so I won't bother. You have to try, right? And also look for problems. You can see unusual behavior. They become secretive. They can become quiet. They start using the computer at odd hours. They start shutting the laptop when you walk in, although we can argue there's other reasons for that. And red flags, you can look for the software. So, without going into great detail, but the Tor browser is the principal means of people using the dark web. It's got a very identifiable icon. It's an onion icon. Look for the onion. Look for VPN applications on the devices. And as was rightly mentioned by Esther Ghey as well earlier, there's some great software out there that you can use to monitor what your children are doing. And I would say use it. I use it. And you can see whether your children are installing certain applications and either allow or block them. And the Tor browser is one of them. So there's things you can do, and you can't just do nothing. You can't just think, kids will be kids. Because as was rightly pointed out by someone you had on earlier, children aren't born murderers. They become that way through what they're exposed to. And if we can detect what they're logging into and looking at, and we can talk to them and hopefully they open up and tell us, if we can catch it early enough, we could potentially save some lives.
What age do you think it is reasonable to monitor what a young person is saying to their friends, saying on social media, looking up on the internet? In other words, at what age are they entitled to privacy?
Well, I've seen people I've seen children on planes on holiday who are logging into using tablets when they're 4 or 5 years old. Just have those conversations early. We talk to children about stranger danger. We need to talk to children about internet danger. It's a very dangerous place, is the internet. And if we're just pretending otherwise, we're fooling ourselves.
Look, it's dead easy, isn't it? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds. Do you think it is reasonable for a parent to monitor what a 15-year-old, what a 16-year-old is doing, looking up on the internet?
You make a good point. Yeah, you have to get this right. There's a difference between helping children stay safe and spying on them. Putting the family apps on, you can't see what you can't see what the children are saying to each other. You can't actually, intrude on conversations, but you can see the applications that are being installed. And as
here's what I'm getting
already. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, David. You can finish your sentence, of course.
No, it's fine. You go ahead.
What I'm getting at is, it's really easy, isn't it, when they're very young? But actually, surely the real danger here, and if they, no 9, 10, 11-year-old, or not very many, are going to be interested in the dark web. There may be more of an interest, and look, I've no idea why, but as they get older, they want to be more independent, they're challenging boundaries, they're doing all of that. So that's why the question about a 15, 16-year-old is probably a very pertinent one. So what do you do to a 15, 16-year-old who's demanding all that independence in the outside world? how much of a family breakdown is there going to be if a 15, 16-year-old, look, is being told, hand over your hard drive?
Well, I think if we're talking about serious crime, of course they should be handing over their hard drive. But if I'm understanding your question correctly, what you're asking me is,
I'm not talking about crime. I'm talking about a parent protecting their child from it, and as part of that, saying we're going to monitor what you're doing. The definition of a child's right up to 18.
I'd be very careful with the term monitoring with a 15 or 16-year-old, because you rightly point out that there will be a lot of backlash against that. They will push back on you. It's what you need to do is establish an open dialogue with them and just talk to them, particularly if they're behaving unusually or they go quiet or they're looking at the computer at odd times. If you know your children, and if you don't know your children that well, you really should. But if you know your children, you'll be able to see that their behavior isn't how it used to be. Something isn't right. You'll be able to pick up on that. As a parent, you can pick up on that. And when you do, that's the point where you need to start saying to them, what's wrong? What's going on? What's happening in your life? Because you might find if you catch them early enough, they're just sliding into it at that point. If you can catch them, well, once they hit red room territory, you're in trouble, right? But if you can catch them at the earliest stages where they're going on the surface web, and they're looking at sites about self-harm or other nastiness, if you can catch them at that point and stem the flow before it reaches the critical point, you have to talk to your children, and you have to keep an eye on your children, and you have to monitor how your children are acting. But there's no one size fits all. I'm not here with a magic bullet. I'm just saying you have to be aware of it and be clued up yourself and keep an eye on your kids.
It's really interesting territory. Dr. David Day, thank you. Will Gardner, thank you. 08085 909 693 with those who have kids you've experienced.